And we're 10 minutes
hello,
late and ready to begin with the Game Huggers. And I'm interrupting Dan. Here with me is Josh and John. John, how's it going this afternoon?
Lovely. I'm not interrupting John. I'm just normal John.
That's absolutely a good thing, because when you go toilet shopping, you want a normal John. And Josh, how's it going?
It's going fairly well. Thank you once again, all of you viewers and listeners. And thanks, Don and Jan, for being a part of the show this week. John and Dan, I should say. Thank you guys for being on. It's a pleasure, as always, to chat with you guys about gaming and other events and movies and gaming events that are going on. Man, there was a big one that just happened a weekend ago. Midwest Gaming Classic. That's a pretty big deal. Anyway, thank you all for being here. Thanks for being a part of the Game Huggers. If you want to chat with us, you can always chat alongside us on the live chat stream. We'll be hitting a few notes and good comments that are shared there. Hopefully there's some interesting communication and conversation going on there. If you want to follow me on Twitter to keep the conversation going before and after our podcast, you can always follow me at _Joshua Turbo. Don't forget the underscore, as it is the most important underscore on all the internet. If you want to follow Dan, you can check him out at pornhub.com/DragonMasterDan.
And just one other side note tied to the chat. While you may call it the live chat, have you seen the activity in there? It's a little bit closer to a dead chat if I've ever seen one.
Hey-o.
But what we're going to be doing is talking about the Midwest Gaming Classic, and this is, I guess, the 13th or 14th, or what year of the event is this, from when it evolved from JagFest into the annual meetup it is today?
It's a lot more than 13th or 14th. It's the very first MGC I went to was, I believe, in 2003 or 2004.
Okay.
So JagFest was 2001, 2002, and then MGC's, I think the first MGC was 2003. And that's when I first went and met a JD when they were doing it in a middle school cafeteria in Milwaukee. It was a good time, a lot of fun. I actually really enjoyed that event, and that's why I've been going every year.
That's the delicious bratwurst from the middle school cafeteria.
Those were tasty. They were very good.
Is that a thing? Is that really a thing?
I used to go to, this is kind of a side note tied to that. I used to go to game trading meetups that were basically organized by a small game store in my area, and they were literally held at like a small church. I'm trying to think of like how you would describe it, like a gymnasium area that was like a small church school. So, you know, you would see things like that from time to time back in the day before video gaming was quite as mainstream as it is today. So all three of us here that are on the show went to the Midwest Gaming Classic, and we all did a few different things. So I guess to start off with, Josh mentioned he first went in 2003. John, when was your first trip to the Midwest Gaming Classic?
I went back when they were at the Olympia Resort. So that was, I think my first time there was 12 years ago, something like that. And I went 3 years in a row, and this is my first time back since then. So it is considerably larger than it was 10, 12 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So that was back when it was in Oconomowoc, and I'm probably not pronouncing it correctly, but really I don't care.
I think you are.
But yeah, that was an interesting venue, and what I liked about that Olympia venue was there was one huge room that was primarily there for vendors, and there were a handful of things off to the side. And the second venue it went to, or at least I don't know if that was the second one, but the second one that I went to after that, the second venue, not the second MGC, was in Brookfield, Wisconsin, and it went from they were using the inside portion of a hotel to we're going to have a small outdoor tent area to we're going to have an enormous circus tent that takes up 3/4 of the parking lot to okay, the parking for MGC has commandeered the entire mall next to it.
Yeah. It definitely outgrew the what was it, the Brookfield Sheridan, that's for sure. Towards the last, I don't know, honestly, the last 5 years, it's been far, far too big for that little venue. One thing I did want to mention too, thank you, Punmaster 9001. Hello, good evening, sir. He's in the live chat. It's not a dead chat, it's live. We have 3 viewers right now. We're doing so well. This is 3 times the amount of viewers I'm used to, so I don't know what to do. But I wanted to mention too, the podcast this week was called Game Huggers, Fight Huggers, because we initially had discussed in our Discord chat about doing a fighters episode of the show because of Mortal Kombat 11's release this week. So we may still touch on some of that. There are some fighting games that are coming up this year and some fighting games that are on current gen things, and maybe even some fighting games that we enjoyed playing. But really, MGC is definitely going to be a big part of our episode this week. So we may come back and do a specific fighting episode someday. I know we've done those in the past, but yeah, we might touch on a little bit of both of that today, just to keep you guys both in the loop. Where our group is firmly on the pulse of what the people want, and people want fighting games.
You say so, man.
Hey, it's Mortal Kombat 11. That's a big deal. Dan is a big fan of the Mortal Kombat series. Huge.
Yeah. Yeah. What's the worst one, Dan? The worst.
All of
Mortal
them.
Kombat.
Four was awful.
I mean, Sub-Zero's mythology is probably the highlight of the series.
I think that, well, if you're talking just the main series, 4 was so bad, just unbelievably terrible.
I'm going to go on a quick rant about the Mortal Kombat games before we roll back to the MGC topic, and that's this. I don't necessarily think the Mortal Kombat games are terrible, but they were overrated to start with. Way back in the early days of 2D fighting games, Street Fighter II came out and completely revolutionized the genre. And shortly thereafter, out comes Fatal Fury, which is the first real Street Fighter II, I don't want to use the term clone, but game that took great inspiration from it and was a copy. And then shortly after that, SNK published a whole bunch of games. There was Fighter's History. There were a lot of them. Mortal Kombat did really two things just a little bit differently. Mortal Kombat had live digitized actors, and Mortal Kombat had blood and fatalities. And I think that those two things, the fact that it was realistic looking and the fact that it was intentionally over-the-top gory, earned it a reputation and an audience that was built not around the quality of the game, the combination, the balance, the gameplay, anything of that sort compared to the SNK and Capcom made fighting games, let alone even some of the other companies that were making knockoffs, so to speak, of Street Fighter II, but just the sheer aesthetics of Mortal Kombat were the big draw. So when the first game came out, it was interesting looking and it was unique in a certain way, but I don't think it was the great quality killer app level game that its reputation and ultimately home sales numbers and infamy tied to the creation of the ESRB rating system leads people to believe. It wasn't a super great innovative product. It was simply trendy because it was realistic looking and violent.
It was the 90s, man. It was extreme. That's all that mattered. It had tude. It had tude.
It had that 90s tude.
Yeah.
And so did Bubsy, and look where that was. But
nah, it didn't have that kind of attitude, though. Sonic had attitude, and Mortal Kombat had attitude. I think what it was, too, is it was just a new player in the fighting game market. It was something brand new. It was fresh. It didn't play very similar to Street Fighter or Fatal Fury or World Heroes. It played different. It had a different style. It had different combinations for fatalities.
But all of those games played differently as well. You had multiple layers in Fatal Fury. You had a zooming in and out system in something like The Art of Fighting. Those games, keep in mind, there were games like Fighter's History that were very, very similar to Street Fighter 2, but when you're saying like Fatal Fury wasn't different, it was because you had a background and a foreground, and there was additional strategy that came from going between those two layers. A game like Samurai Showdown was different because it was weapons-based and had these zooming in and out features that lets you expand or lower the battlefield along with items that could be picked up during the fight. There were games that did a lot more in terms of innovation, but did so from a gameplay rather than from an aesthetic standpoint, which I think is one of the knocks I have on Mortal Kombat in general.
Yeah, I can understand that. I think that Mortal Kombat, the first Mortal Kombat, came out in 93 or 92 and then 93 on. I think it was a step back from where we were with Street Fighter 2 Turbo. It was even a step back from like Tournament Fighters, Ninja Turtles Tournament Fighters. Like those kind of fighting games were way more advanced and way more strategy levels.
The original Street Fighter 2 that came out in 1991, a year and a half earlier, was considerably more advanced than the original Mortal Kombat was.
Yeah.
And I felt that way even as a kid, but everybody jumped around Mortal Kombat because, look, it's bloody. Look, you can rip somebody's head off. And that's not to say that the game had no redeeming value whatsoever. I mean, it was better than, say, Pit Fighter, but is that really a compliment?
Hey.
No, I mean, no, but...
So Mortal Kombat 2 comes out. It has more characters. It has a lot of secrets. It has some improved combos and some enhanced gameplay, but I think is still worse than the SNK and Capcom games that were being developed around the same time. Mortal Kombat 3 comes out, and okay, it's better than some of the clones that are out there on the market, but I still think the overall product quality of the Mortal Kombat series was greatly overrated and built around the aesthetics more so than the gameplay. So to me, it's an all flash, no substance kind of game.
I thought in the original or the older Mortal Kombat games, I think 2 was where it peaked. 2 was where this popularity peaked. 2 is a better game than 1 by a lot, and I actually think it was a better game than 3 too, because they released Mortal Kombat 3 and then initially realized how much they messed up with the characters that they brought in. They brought in more generic characters with even more generic storylines and even more generic fatalities. So they made Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 to kind of try to fix that. And then the series really kind of faded off for a little while.
Weren't those the home versions, though, the Ultimate, and where they added characters? I think the original arcade version didn't quite do that. The other thing is
there was Mortal Kombat 3 and Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 in arcades.
Was there? Okay,
Yes.
I was unfamiliar with the variations there. But one other thing that's kind of worth noting is you then had Mortal Kombat knockoffs. When you play a game like Kasumi Ninja, you have to say to yourself, what the hell is this? Now, eventually what wound up happening with the fighting game genre, which to a certain degree kind of obsoleted Mortal Kombat, at least for a while, was Virtual Fighter and Tekken and Battle Arena Toshinden, and a number of 3D fighters hit the market, Dead or Alive and so on and so forth. And that took away some of the innovation that they were doing for a while, which is, I think, why the franchise stalled out after Mortal Kombat 3 Trilogy, whichever variation of the game.
The Trilogy was pretty good. I do remember Trilogy being pretty fun. That was, I believe, a strict home release that came out on PlayStation Saturn and actually played really well on the N64. Unfortunately, you have to use an N64 controller, but the fact that the game was cartridge-based and had no load times was really sweet. A big advantage over the PlayStation and the Saturn versions. But once they hit 4 and then 4 Gold, I think it was, on the Dreamcast and some other consoles, I think the N64 did get a version of it. Wow, it was just such a and they tried to do weapons-based fighting, and I don't know, honestly, after that, it was such a big disappointment that I kind of like lost track of the Mortal Kombat series. I didn't even really realize that they were still counting them. Because I remember like Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance was big. It was on the GameCube, Xbox, and the PS2. But in the background, you could see like the V in the back. So like Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance was 5. But then after that, I honestly lost track because there was obviously a 6, 7, 8, 9, and then X, and then now 11. But
Well, as I think I mentioned before, there was also the standalone game that was on the N64 and the PlayStation, which out of a rating of 1 through 10, I would rate a Sub-Zero.
Oh, zing!
That was pretty bad.
It was pretty bad, but it's what we've come to expect.
Yep.
I was never a Mortal Kombat guy at all. I was always a Street Fighter guy. I mean, I don't know if that's a thing, like if there are camps, like you can either be a Street Fighter guy or a Mortal Kombat guy.
Definitely.
Yep, but for Super Nintendo, there was also Final Fight guy.
Wow.
Man, you are. I mean, you're outdoing yourself.
I know.
Wow.
It's bad.
But yeah, so I never got into Mortal Kombat. I think when I was a kid or when I was in high school or whatever, I probably played it in arcades once or twice. My brother had it on the Genesis because real blood. But other than that, it was never a thing for me.
You didn't go to the arcade in Merrill, the Starcade? No,
I actually never went in there.
I have a video of me and a couple of friends, including one of my buddies, Matt Filio. We went in there. We were playing Mortal Kombat 2 on the arcade. I actually still have the cassette tape of that hanging out in the arcade.
Matt Filio, the only other kid in town with the Turbo Graphics.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
But no, just kind of one other thing tied to Mortal Kombat and it being very popular on the Genesis, people buying it because of blood. To me, and this is also kind of a where were you at the time? I was one of the people who, at like age 11, was saying this game is overrated crap, and everyone was fawning over it because it had blood and guts and had digitized, realistic-looking graphics. And I think to a certain, and I'm the one saying, hey, this Fatal Fury special game is way better. This Fatal Fury 2 is way better. This Street Fighter, all of these other games were much, much better playing. And I think to a certain degree, Mortal Kombat almost became I'm trying to think of the most polite way to phrase this, like the white trash house staple for everyone who had a Genesis and would crank up the volume and play that, but which, by the way, was the inferior version compared to the Super Nintendo outside of the Blood Code.
Yeah.
It was unrefined savages, Dan. They just didn't have your keen sophistication.
I'm well aware of this. I told them that.
Dan's taste in fighting games is a little highbrow for this community.
He was 12 years old, sipping his cognac, saying, "You charlatans."
Well, you don't know a good fighting game if it hits you in the face and then took your head off because you like fatalities.
So anyway, I believe we were talking about Midwest Gaming Classic at some point.
We're gonna, yeah.
Oh,
I think we should definitely segue into that somehow because the Galloping Ghost, a place that you can go and check out all of the Mortal Kombat games and series, had a great selection of arcade machines at the MGC.
What are they, a new sponsor or something? Why are you up their ass? Jesus, man.
Galloping Ghost, a fun arcade downtown Chicago. Wait, what actually is it?
It's actually in Brookfield, Illinois, and I haven't been to Galloping Ghost since Friday, so it's been a long time for me.
So I'm not. They aren't sponsoring this show, but maybe I should hit them up for a sponsorship. But how has it? I mean, they've expanded by a lot now.
So they have like 710 machines in operation at the regular Galloping Ghost arcade. This is not counting their separate pinball arcade. For some comparison, like when you and I, Josh, and fans of the show won't know this, but maybe 7 or 8 years ago, us, and a mutual friend of ours named Byron went one night in like spring or somewhere in that neighborhood.
It was like a week. It was like a week before MGC. I remember that.
It might have been, and we were
That's
actually
why he was there.
like we were actually at Galloping Ghost until like 1 a.m. when they closed, just sitting and talking and playing a handful of games. When we were there might have been 300 machines there. Now there is 710.
Holy crap.
So I've been there since that time, and I remember it being incredibly uncomfortable and crowded and not very pleasant to be in there. Is it better now because they expanded? Is like I know
it's you still have similar problems with parking. There is more space. There is a lot more machines. There are sometimes machines in corners that are a little bit difficult to access. As you would expect with having 710, usually 20-plus-year-old pieces of electronics, at times there are machines that are not in operation. But what is really, really impressive about it today in 2019 April compared to years past is just the sheer number of games that are there. And I remember thinking this in previous visits where you would go there and it was not particularly well air conditioned. It was hot. I once took a young lady there and she complained it smelled of nerd sweat.
Ooh la la.
I know. But you'd go there, it would be hot. It would be uncomfortable. There was actually difficult to park in, which is still a bit of a problem. When you go there now, just about every classic arcade game you can think of is there. I mean, there were a few that I had always wanted to see there, and I hadn't been there in maybe a year, and went back on Friday, and they're there. And a lot of stuff is in operation. They do a fantastic job of maintaining and taking care of those machines. And when you think about the fact that, like, for many, many years, until maybe 5 years ago, Fun Spot in New Hampshire was the largest arcade in the United States, and they had about 385 games. And Galloping Ghost is damn near double that now.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
It's really, really impressive, and you have to give credit to Doc Mack and Jerry, the two folks that run Galloping Ghosts, for having built, quite frankly, the arcade of my dreams as a kid. When I was a kid, I would go to arcades very frequently, and there would always be games I'd see at one arcade or saw at an arcade long ago that I wished I could go back and play. And when you go in there, most of the games that you possibly think of wanting to play are there. There might be a weird exception or two that you always, had heard about and wanted to play that might not be there. But for the most part, it is damn impressive. And I think that they've done an incredible job of keeping that up. I do, sometimes wonder a little bit about Galloping Ghosts and worry a little bit about Galloping Ghosts, because if you go there Monday through Thursday or even like a Sunday afternoon, it's reasonably quiet. It's, again, they pay based on the number of people that come into the arcade. You have to figure the rent, the number of employees, the repair that goes on, the electric bill, all of these things have to run a considerable cost or a pretty penny. Yeah. So I do, sometimes worry, and I have some concern over their long-term viability with running an operation such as that, especially considering there is limited parking. So it makes it at times difficult for a whole ton of people to be in there. But my gosh, it is a fantastic arcade with a few drawbacks, like we mentioned, tied to the heat and tied to the crowdedness and the parking situation.
Can I ask about do they have, what's their Japanese arcade selection like? Do they have
They have quite a few Japanese exclusive games where presumably they bought the PCB and then the marquee and brought them over there. So I've seen things like Ikaruga there. I've seen quite a few Japanese shoot 'em ups there. Right. I don't have an exact. Again, I think if you go to their website, there's a count. And I think if you go to AURCADE Orcade, I don't even know how it's supposed to be pronounced, AURcade.com, that has a list of the number of games that most arcades have.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's some definitely impressive ones. I think Galloping Ghost has like 125 machines that no other arcade that's operating in arcades, AU Arcades database has operating.
So one thing I wanted to jump in here and talk a little bit about the live chat. Our friend Pickle Friction says that he believes that Galloping Ghost gets a new arcade machine every Monday. Correct?
I believe that is the case, though it's not necessarily a new machine. I think it's a new game. So there are a few situations where that 710 number is expanded. They might have a Play Choice 10 Nintendo system that has 10 games on it, and they're counting all 10 games. They might have a Neo Geo MVS 6-slot
gotcha.
or 4-slot that has 4 or 6 games in it. There's a few instances where they have some old arcade games that are running the same type of basic JAMA board, and there's a switch, and you can switch between a couple of different kinds of boards to save space. But yeah, I believe that is the case, that there is a new game added once a week.
And they do have, and he also mentioned they have Primal Rage 2. There's a good story from Primal Rage 2 when they brought it all the way to MGC one year.
Well,
do you guys know that story?
I don't.
Well, and I mean, you could probably go cheers and have a beer to it, right?
You certainly could. So I believe there's only a handful of those in the world. What, 2 or 3 or something crazy like that?
Something like that. Yeah, it was not a mass-produced or officially released game. This is just a prototype that they have.
Galloping Ghost got it, and before they even displayed it in their own arcade, they decided to bring it to MGC to kind of like do the grand unveiling of this new arcade machine. The Primal Rage 2 arcade machine and board and everything. Brought it to MGC, advertised it, showed it at MGC, and then they brought it back to their, the idea was then they bring it back to the Galloping Ghost. The only place you can play it is Galloping Ghost. Some absolute effing moron. This is back in Brookfield at the Sheraton. He put his beer on the arcade machine, and he was, it was sitting on the arcade stick or the joystick area, and he's like, it's just as really annoying me. So he put it up on top of the arcade machine, and of course it dumped over onto the back of it and all the way down, and it leaked down into the monitor, into the PCB board, and zap, off it went.
Nice.
Yeah, that was a awesome moment. They basically banned drinking in the arcade area because of that. I don't know if that's still a thing. Actually, it probably is still a thing. I don't think you bring drinks in and out of those convention halls at the big place that we're in now. But yeah, when that happened, they banned taking a drink and carrying it out of the bar in any way. when we were at the Brookfield Sheraton. But holy shit, I couldn't believe that happened.
That's
luckily
crazy.
though, they took it all back. Dried everything out, cleaned it from top to bottom, just cleaned everything out and booted it up, and it worked just fine. Luckily. It's just the craziest thing. I couldn't believe someone did that, and no one knows who it was either because the guy ran away.
Yeah, for his life.
Probably Doc Mac looks like the kind of guy who could actually kick your ass. I mean, at least in his virtual cyberpunk world, he could probably do that. But yeah. So wow, crazy. So what are your overall thoughts, John? Now you haven't been to MGC in a long time. So you said it's grown into like a real convention looking event. I mean, it used to be kind of a gamer gathering, like a couple vendors, in a hotel, and maybe 800 to 1,000 people. But now we're like between 10 to 15 grand people there now. And so what's your feeling of the place?
I felt like I didn't get to see everything. I spent a good deal of time in the vendor hall.
Right.
So the overall show I thought was really cool. What I like about it is that it still, to me at least, feels like the show from 10 years ago, in that it feels like I don't know, it feels like a small show in a big space. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not out of control. It's not like, I don't know. I guess I don't know how to say what I'm trying to say, but it feels like a family event, kind of, just like a close knit event, just happens to be huge now. I never felt like it was too crowded, really.
Right.
I never felt like there were excessive amounts of lines. It just never felt like a giant spectacle to me, but at the same time, I was like, this is awesome. I'd never seen, I don't know if I've ever seen so many pinball machines in one room before. That was pretty damn impressive. And the arcade selection was great. So you help out with the museum, right? Or the gameplay area.
I don't help with anything. No, but yeah, I do. I do. Been doing that for about 7 years now.
And what I loved about that, other than just like the breadth of like games that were there, I mean, it was how many rows, like 10 rows of games, maybe more. What I loved was how well the games were curated. You're not just walking up to a Sega Genesis and playing Sonic the Hedgehog. You're not, I mean, you can, but there's a whole hell of a lot more there. There are games, there's some games there that I'd never seen before. There was a game called Panzer Bandits, and I was like, this game's freaking awesome. Like, I've never played this one before. It reminds, it's like it's got kind of a Guardian Heroes kind of vibe to it a little bit. There were things like the FM Towns Marty, which I've seen on the internet. I've never played one before, so I was like, shit, I'm going to check that out. There was just a lot of really neat things that's just sitting there, available for anybody to just walk up, sit down, and play. And I thought that was super awesome. It was a super welcoming environment. The one thing that really struck me about the vendor hall, though, is, and I guess this probably shouldn't have surprised me as much as it did, but so it's been, like I said, almost a decade since I've been to Midwest Gaming Classic or any sort of con like this, with a load of vendors. But what struck me about it was, holy crap, has retro gaming gotten expensive? Good Lord.
Well, and what's kind of interesting, John, tied to the vendors and the retro gaming is, I've noticed in the past 2 MGCs, since really the vendor hall moved from a tent into the Madison or the Wisconsin Center, I should say, is that you're actually seeing less retro gaming specific vendors. You're seeing a lot more places that are selling plushies or just selling homebrews, or selling massages, or selling things that are not necessarily.
Okay, I gotta stop you right there. I saw the massage booth, and I was just like, these people are insane.
That's not a bad idea. I think that's a cool idea, honestly.
No, I agree. Excellent idea. But wow, brave souls handing out massages at a gaming convention. Like, just
It's actually
Brave
become
souls.
it's actually become a really big thing at bigger conventions, because you get those
Yeah.
people who aren't used to walking around all day or whatever, and they're up and they're walking around and they're in pain. They'll pay you $30 to get a massage for 30 minutes.
Yeah. So anyway, back to the pricing thing. I just couldn't believe it. There were some games there that I had bought at previous Midwest Gaming Classics. So like, Japanese import Saturn games, or even, like our beloved Turbo Duo stuff. Like I'm expecting those to be somewhat expensive. I was not expecting to be thousands of dollars expensive. And there were moments when I looked at some of those games and I was like, well, hell, I've got that game sitting in my basement.
I know, right?
I sure could use $1,500,
Right.
But so, I mean, I don't really collect games anymore. In fact, I'm trying to like just thin out my collection a little bit, just because I'm an old man. I don't need this shit anymore. But even if I were, I think I'm priced out of it. I can't picture myself spending that kind of coin on games these days.
Yeah,
well, as a good example, I picked up a game you referenced earlier, Panzer Bandits, a few years ago, and it's just as a side note for anyone who's never played it, it's the most treasure-like a game you will ever play that was not made by Treasure.
Totally.
So, what system is it for?
PlayStation.
Huh.
It's absolutely fantastic and very well worth picking up. But that was a game that I think I paid about $70 for. I think even on eBay, it's going for like $125. It's only been like 2 years since I bought it.
Well, so at the show, I sat down and played it, and I was like, "This game's great. I wonder how much it is on eBay." I looked it up, $250.
Yeah, it
was
it's
nuts.
ridiculous. Yeah. And I got it just a few years ago, and I remember, again, I did wait around until there was an auction or whatever, but I paid like $70 for it and was very happy with it.
Yeah.
So prices have skyrocketed on a whole lot of stuff, and again, I think there is kind of a price bubble going on based on certain consoles and certain rarity of things that's going, and I think that's actually dissuaded some people from vending. Like, it actually felt to me like there were less retro game vendors there than in years past. There maybe have been more total vendors at the show, places selling posters and artwork and plushies and all sorts of other stuff, or homebrews, but the number of vendors that were specifically there to sell retro games has gone down over time.
Yeah.
Well, dude was there selling, you probably saw him right when you walk in the vendor hall. He was selling boxed TurboGrafx games, like really nice condition, but oh boy, those prices.
I talking about Jeff Masser?
No idea. He had well, there was a copy of Soldier Blade, which is one of the 5 games I don't own for Turbo Duo TurboGrafx, and I knew it was going to be expensive, but I was just curious, what's the price on it? I'm pretty sure he said like $600, and I was like, holy crap. Okay, then I had no idea, because I remember like 10 years ago, it was for sale on the long dead, the now dead forums, and I think whoever was selling it for like $80, and I was just like, I can wait. I'm sure I can get it for a better price. Yeah, not so much.
Yeah, and just kind of tied to certain game consoles that have become more popular now than they were during their, I guess, heyday, so to speak, have gone up in value more. So TurboGrafx and Saturn stuff, at least North American stuff, is way more expensive now than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah. Oh yeah, naturally. I mean, things are just going to go up in price, I imagine, but it still shocked me by how much it went up in price.
I mean, things have kind of gone. Certain things have gone down in price. Like if you look at Atari 2600 stuff, it's actually dropped in price over the years.
Yeah, I suppose so.
It varies a little bit, and I think the people that were big into collecting Atari stuff were, maybe a few years older than the people who were big into collecting NES stuff. So the people that were collecting Atari stuff are in a much higher percentage of folks who have a full-time job, a mortgage, kids, all sorts of other expenses and things. And while they may have collected Atari stuff when they were a little bit younger, as they've added to this huge amount of financial burden that adulthood in Western society brings to us, they're a lot less likely to spend money on things. And in certain cases, like you, are looking to thin out their collections of things a little bit, if not get out of the hobby entirely, if they have another way to play these games conveniently. They sell stuff off, and the process of less buyers, more sellers continues, and you see prices deflate. And you've seen that happen on some NES stuff in recent years, and that will probably hit the 16-bit systems eventually. But something like the TurboGrafx or the Neo Geo, where there's a very limited amount of not just the games, but the hardware out there, probably won't be as impacted by that deflation.
Right on.
That was a lot. Thank you, Dan. Yeah,
Did you guys check out any panels or anything like that? Is that your...
I did. So I had kind of a fun experience at one. Do you know who Howard Phillips is?
Yeah. Did you go to the Frank Cifaldi Howard Phillips thing?
I went to the Frank Cifaldi Howard Phillips thing, and there were a handful of questions that Frank did not know the answer to. So I'm trying to remember. One of them was something involving the Famicom. I can't remember what it was, but it was asking who designed the D-pad. And I immediately shouted out Gunpei Yokoi. And then there were a couple of other random ones where I was the person from the audience who would shout things out. And I think at one point, Howard had asked, who here is familiar with Japanese Famicom magazines? And I was very familiar with Famitsu and had seen certain ones. And I was the only person in the crowd who raised my hand, and he kind of looked at me and gave me like a thumbs up. So at the end of the panel, they didn't get a chance to do the Q&A. So Howard said, okay, we'll try Q&A in the hallway because they're kicking us out of the room. So Howard immediately walked up to me, and we just started talking until a large enough crowd of people formed around us that they kicked us out because we were blocking a fire exit.
Nice.
So I had a nice time talking with Howard Phillips, who's a very nice gentleman and has a lot of wonderful stories about the history of Nintendo and of the modern video gaming industry as a whole. And yeah, that was the only panel I attended, but I enjoyed it.
Right on, man. I wanted to do the Retronauts thing, but I didn't get there until they were just about to start, and it was standing room only. And
I tracked down Jeremy Parrish had a separate panel he was doing over in the museum hall area, kind of off to the left-hand side, but he was doing it with Bob Mackey, and it was tied to some early, like a late 70s shooter game. But unfortunately, if you weren't in the first row of people, because there was so much other sound that was going on in that room, he was completely inaudible.
Yeah, that's too bad. I did see Jeremy walking around the show floor, but I wasn't going to be one of those creepy stalker guys who was like, "Hey, dude," you know.
I saw Ted DiBiase in the hallways.
So did I, wearing his sweatpants or his tracksuit. I mean,
he wasn't. Yeah, I don't remember what he was in. He was just in like jeans and a t-shirt or something like that. But he was playing on a cell phone, and he obviously looked like he was doing something or like talking to somebody or texting or whatever. And I just happened to walk by and I said hello. And he said hello. That was about it. I'm like, I was thinking like initially, I'm just like, oh, I should get my phone out and ask him for a picture and all that. But I'm like, then there's gonna be a crowd of people and he'll just be more irritated. So I said hello to Ted DiBiase, and that was
nice. The $1 Million Man.
Yeah.
There were more than enough Ghostbuster cosplayers at the show to.
Yeah. That was pretty cool.
To greet Ernie Hudson, so that was.
Yeah, that was the first year that they really tried to pull in like some real actors and or personalities of some sort.
Yeah.
So it was pretty cool. That was something new.
Sven Gulli.
Well,
he's been there for a few years.
Yeah.
So where's Sven Gulli based out of? I had never heard of him until. Oh, okay. I'd never heard of him until like a couple of years ago.
He's basically the new Bozo the Clown.
Well, he's new, but has been on since the 70s.
And the male Elvira, kind of?
So he's actually been doing horror hosting for longer than Elvira. He started in the late 70s.
Really?
Local in Chicago, and the station that he was on in Chicago started to, what's the word here? Not syndicate, but they would show him in other stations that were owned by the same broadcasting group. So He wound up being on in Detroit, Boston, Philadelphia, San Francisco, a whole bunch of big markets in the early 80s. Eventually, the station group he worked for got bought out by Fox. And Fox said, we don't want to have something as lowbrow as a horror host, but he was still under contract. So after a couple of years, he hosted an extremely similar show to what he did with Svengoolie, where he would run low-budget movies late at night, to a point where he would even dress as Svengoolie if he was doing a horror movie, for a whole bunch of years. And I guess at a certain point that was canceled, and he had a 1-year non-compete clause. So sometime in 1994, he started working for a broadcasting company called Weigel, who owned the MeTV Rerun Network.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And
Okay, yeah.
the MeTV Rerun Network got fired up nationally. They started broadcasting Svengoolie in just about every major market in the country.
Crazy. I seriously had never heard of him until just about a year or two ago. No idea he even existed.
I didn't know what he was until Dan just explained it. Like I kind of had an idea what it was, but I had no idea there was such rich history to it. I thought it was something new and trendy or whatever. The first time I'd ever even acknowledged what it was when I was on stage with him when I was dressed as Starman in that costume contest 2 years ago.
Nice.
And one other quick thing tied to that, in between when he was hired by Weigel and when MeTV went national, he was on nationally as well. Universal had a Universal Pictures horror movie syndication show that they had him hosting as well, and that was on nationally for a few years.
That's crazy.
Nice.
So he's been doing this for a long time on a grand scale.
It's a shtick that works, man. Good for him.
Yeah, exactly.
And tied to Svengoolie, I have a rubber chicken he signed for me.
Well,
right. Yeah.
well, you're gonna treasure that forever.
Exactly.
So the Howard Phillips panel that went really well, and you answered some questions. I remember you had chatted with him right afterwards.
Afterwards there was supposed to be a Q&A after the main speaking points of the panel went, but the main speaking points of the panel went over. So when the Q&A ended, everybody had to leave, and they literally told him, like, you could just talk to people in the hallway. Because I was the one constantly answering all of the things Frank didn't know, or when he would ask the audience stuff, he immediately just came to me.
Yeah, Frank wound up in our hotel room later, Josh.
What? Really?
Yeah, you were sitting right next to him.
No.
Yeah, he was the guy playing Bloody Wolf all night.
Oh my God, are you serious?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, he was sitting on the floor playing Bloody Wolf.
That was maybe my favorite point of the entire weekend, was just getting away from all those people and just hanging out and have a few drinks. I mean, that may be a highlight of my everything. Just I was sitting playing Lords of Thunder, Winds of Thunder with Trickman Terry, and he was talking about there was a code for like the code that you put in to get like the boss rush, or you can do the 10,000 credits or whatever. Yeah. I know the code, and I told him what it was, and he's like, "Oh, thanks." I'm like, "Holy shit! I just told Trickman Terry a code to a game."
That's awesome.
And I probably read on one of his Trickman or the Quarterman or whatever, the tricks and tips and tricks in the section where he probably wrote the damn code. Oh, that was a highlight. That was such a good time. I had a good time with that.
And you know that was in a Johnny Turbo comic, don't you? It came to his sidekick in a dream.
And security only came to our room once, so that was pretty good.
That's not so bad. Yeah,
that's pretty good. I believe, however, you guys, I'm sure you guys are probably building up to it, but I believe the highlight of the show was probably the game show on Saturday night at 6 o'clock.
That was fun.
I heard it was amazing. What's that, Dan?
I saw part of it, so we should probably just explain the idea of the show here. What you did is you found the two least familiar with anything gaming married couples you could find with the thickest possible.
That one guy had a pretty decent. He had at least a grip on what they were talking about.
Yeah, and I forget her name. She was wearing the Parappa the Rapper hat. She did okay. She did pretty well.
Yeah, there was one team that definitely knew significantly more than the other team.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, is the team that lost.
Indeed, it was. I'm pretty sure that's because some jackass shouted out the answer to the final question, and they heard it. But that's fine, because we were planning on giving the grand prize to both of them anyway, so it all worked out. But it was a lot of fun. I loved how much audience participation we got. I thought it was great. We were able to give away just a buttload of some okay games and a whole lot of not great games. You know,
yeah, I was in the crowd and I did not answer the question right. I had no idea what Dota is or what it ever means, or still don't even know what it means. But I did come home with my awesome copy of Oda Medius Excellent for the Xbox 360, which sadly does not play on Xbox One. So I have to dig out a 360 and hook that up to try Gradius and my Vic Viper with some booby action going on.
Yeah,
there.
I'm pretty sure the pillowcase is in there too.
It is in here. I still haven't opened it.
That's the deluxe version.
Yeah.
It's not worth anything. I've already looked it up.
No, it's not. That's why you own it. I had that thing on eBay for about 4 months and nobody bought it. So
yeah, so it's got a decent book and there's some cool artwork and it's got a soundtrack. It's like, why would they do all this effort? Konami wasted so much money on this for no one to buy it and no one to be even interested in buying it. Because
I wasted even more money because I'm the one person who bought it.
Well, Dan, I'm the second person who bought it. So
yeah,
there it is. Yeah. You get your pillowcase. So is it like a life size?
I have no idea.
Dan, you slept with it, I'm sure.
All the time. But no, I have what's kind of bizarre is I'm enough of a collectard to where I actually bought that version of it and then waited to buy a copy to play when I could find like a $10 just the game one at GameStop.
Holy cow, Dan!
So I bought that game twice.
That's a hell of an investment. I kind of think that game's shit too.
It's not good.
It's not. I've heard the other Odomedius game is better.
Yeah,
there's two.
Yes, this is the second one.
Oh my god! Why did they do this? Why would they do this?
I don't know.
Gradius 5 on the PS2 was so amazing. Why didn't they?
That was made by Treasure.
Well, yeah, I understand that, but work with Treasure again. Make another Gradius game. Good grief.
Yeah, it's not like Gradius Rebirth had come out around that same time and was amazing.
So back to MGC. What sort of improvements would you guys like to see? I mean, I thought it was a great show and pulled off really well.
The feeling that I get about MGC is that the venue might be a little bit too big for the show as it's currently set up.
Oh, you think so?
I actually think so, and I think that that's potentially something that's maybe impacting the amount of foot traffic and vendors and things that are there, because it's a little bit difficult to find parking and it's expensive to find parking. It's a little bit of a more difficult area to drive in or out of than it was in Brookfield. Now keep in mind, Brookfield had a bigger parking problem because people essentially had commandeered the entire parking lot of a reasonably active shopping mall. But all things considered, I don't know that this is the perfect venue for the show. And, while I know Dan Lucen is a very fine and fiscally conservative man, I do worry about the financial viability of that particular venue combined with potentially declining admission revenue.
Well, I don't think there's anything to worry about as far as admissions declining. They're going up. And I think that the idea of, well, I'm not telling you you're wrong. You're not wrong. I don't know if you're wrong or not. But I think the idea is the venue and it being so huge and the ability to have the venue expand into the other conference and in convention space that they have is just because we're expecting the show to continue to grow. And I think it's going to continue to grow, and it is continuing to grow. Our attendance this year, I believe Saturday we had 10,000 people alone. So
thanks to the game show.
Pretty much, yeah. That Saturday night at 6 p.m. What is that podcast called? It's the
I don't know. It's called something or other.
Something the best or something the finest.
Yeah. Run by some jackasses. I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, so
the blonde guy was handsome though, charming,
extremely charming. Yeah. And that's in the face of two blizzards too that we've had in the last 2 years as well, and still attendance continues to grow. Imagine if we have a decent weekend some year. But I did want to mention too, the one thing that I want to not see next year.
Yeah.
And I loved everything. I thought this year, as far as being a part of the show and like setting up and tearing down at the end and the beginning, like this is the most organized we've ever been as far as the museum staff goes and as far as vending goes. We had a easy time to get in, mostly an easy time to get out. There was a major issue with the dock area in the back where we were trying to get everybody out because all the vendors were trying to get the hell out of there as fast as they could. There was really no priorities. There was no anything. When we went back, they told us it was about a 2-hour wait. And this was at 7:30 at night on Sunday. And I'm like, I'm not leaving here at 10 p.m. just to stand around because we worked our asses off to get out early. Yeah. So we wound up pushing a dolly and all my game systems and all this stuff all the way out to the main convention center front doors, out the doors to the hotel, out those doors, through the parking garage to my van, loaded the van and brought the dolly back. And it only took us an hour. We still saved time. Didn't have to move the car. Didn't have to do anything.
Nice.
The big thing that I would change though, there was a DJ in the museum area and next to the tabletop area and next to where the arcade people were and stuff like that. Man, they put a DJ out by us again. And I know the tabletop people were having a really hard time with that. They maybe didn't complain to anyone, but when a DJ's blasting the same 20 songs over and over and over again all day long, and there's people trying to play a board game, trying to learn the rules, trying to teach someone to play a game. And there's this like, do you believe in love after? Like, come on, like, stop. This is the worst. And
I only heard pump up the jam 5 times. You know, that's fine. I think it would be cool if they had the tabletop room like in a separate room. Like
I thought that too, but somehow, some way, they don't want to because they think that will like reduce their foot traffic by their tables. But honestly, I think if they had enough presence there and they had enough events going on, maybe some tabletop tournaments and stuff, they would draw more people to come and do those specific things. But
yeah,
I made a comparison to 2D Con. That's something, John, you and you should go to that, at least for the day. I know Ryan's going, and I believe that's in August. It's right up the street from you.
Yep.
It's a really fun time, about 2,000 to 3,000 people go to that. And they really do focus on making sure that the tabletop stuff is recognized and they get their fair share of, the main stage. And it's awesome. It's totally like off to the side. They keep their tabletop stuff very separate from everything else. There's no arcade machines. There's definitely no fucking DJ. There's nothing, like all that stuff. It's a very quiet, nice area, and it was packed. We had people playing all sorts of games, and it was really good. It was really cool. That convention, small now, but someday it may grow. So
I would like to change one thing, but this is something that cannot be changed unless they move it to a different city. Milwaukee's not really known for its service and hospitality, is it?
Well, I mean, it hosted Gen Con for over 20 years, and that's the nation's biggest gaming convention.
No, I'm just talking about like the restaurants in the area and the bars in the area. Holy crap! Some of the worst service I've ever had. Some of the slowest service I've ever had.
Really?
Some of the shittiest food I've ever had. Like, what is up? Like, I went to like 5 different restaurants. Holy cow! All garbage.
Well, that's sad.
Yeah. I was kind of just like, what? Anyway, but that's neither here nor there. That's nothing.
Milwaukee is known for the beer, but not necessarily for the fine service. Yeah. They are known for, if you want to get yourself a little bit flickered up, that is what Milwaukee is for. It is not for.
I'm trying to think of the places that we went because I went to a few places. There was Brandon and I and some other people, the staff. We went to Fanny. No, what is that place called? It's like a breakfast diner right across the street. It was really good, and Dunkin' Donuts was fine, and Starbucks was fine, and I don't know, I didn't have any issues with any place.
Those are some highfalutin places, Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that's whatever.
I've never waited so long for a drink in my fucking life as I have in Milwaukee.
George Webb's, that's where we went, was George Webb. That was actually very good. The service was fine.
Yeah. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. That's nothing MGC can control. I was just so anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Right. So one place I would have to say, or one question that the chat had been asking, this is just the one last thought here too, and it's back to Mortal Kombat, unfortunately. But Dan, would you say that there is any other fighting game that was developed in the US that was better than Mortal Kombat?
That was developed in the U.S. So I'd have to think about U.S. developed fighting games for a little bit because there weren't a whole lot. I mean, Tattoo Assassins wasn't finished.
Way of the Warrior.
Way of the Warrior is, not necessarily so great. I do think of the Rare-made Killer Instinct games as being better than Mortal Kombat. But those are a little bit out of the way. But yeah, I can't think of a whole lot. One thing that's kind of worth noting, especially when we're talking about older games like the original Mortal Kombat games, is at that time, Western developers weren't so good at making console or arcade games, with the possible exception of Midway, who made Mortal Kombat and NBA Jam and Smash TV and a variety of other classics. I'm just kind of continuing to think of more and more as I go on talking about how wonderful Midway was. But not all games are as great as Cruisin'. With that said, yeah, I'm thinking of Western-made one-on-one fighting games, and there aren't a whole lot that jump to my mind besides Killer Instinct that were particularly noteworthy. But I feel like there might have been one or two other ones that had some degree of Western development that were good. But, I also think of things like Time Killers that were garbage. So we're getting close to the end of the show here. Mm-hmm. Do you have any final and parting thoughts here, John?
I don't. I will be going to Midwest Gaming Classic again next year, though.
Nice.
And I think I might bring my kids because they're super jacked to go. So I might bring them all the way to Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Hopefully your dining services are better with your children.
Yeah, that was just one little weird thing from the night or from the weekend where I was like, what is with the restaurants here? What is with the bars? The hotel bar? Holy cow, man. We went to the lounge on Friday night. Wow, that was some bad service. Woof.
I had one restaurant when I was there, and I will admit it was incredibly slow.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, the lady walks up to us with some drinks, and she goes, "Whose are these?" And I'm like, I don't even know what you have. And she's like, I don't either. I'm like, well, I can't help you then. So there you go. They're not mine. What the fuck?
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway.
Josh, your parting thoughts.
You know what? I thought MGC overall was very good. I hope that some of the people that did come this year that didn't have that great of a time wind up coming back next year. I know Majors is expecting to come back next year. He wasn't able to be there this year, and there's a lot of people that actually weren't able to come that we missed out on. But I know one guy, Nelly, he has been on this podcast before, John. And he had a bad experience at MGC this year, and he's not 100% sure he's going to be coming back. Maybe we'll have to get him on sometime to talk more about. But it had a lot to do with just a lot of not a lot of the same guys coming back, kind of feeling bummed out about that. And then also, his hotel was not necessarily connected to the convention center. It was at the Hilton, I believe it was. And or no, the Hyatt, sorry, Hyatt. And they locked down the skywalks after like 10 p.m., 11 p.m. some of those nights. And so he had to like leave the convention center, go outside, walk around the convention center to get to his hotel. It was just a big, annoying mess. And I guess he was very frustrated with it. And he's like, what the hell? I drive like 16 hours to come to this thing, and it's just more inconvenient. He's like, bring it back to Brookfield. It's a pain in the ass now. It's like, well, that sucks. But
I want to give one quick shout out to Monkey Death. Because that dude, so he came to the after party on Saturday night, and he was just up for anything, man. He was just there to have a good time. He brought his duo, and that's where everybody was playing Lords of Thunder, and he brought prizes to give away to people. He had he set up a high score competition. He brought like a trunk full of beer. Like that guy was just ready to have a good time, and have fun. So hats off to that guy.
Yeah, I love that guy. He was awesome.
Yeah,
it's very cool.
But just remember, with Josh, it's never hats off. Except for today.
God damn it, Dan. Anyway, thank you guys so much for being a part of it. John and Dan, thanks for being here and talking to me tonight. It was good to catch up with you guys and just hang out and talk about games and stuff. Thanks, Matthias and Majors and Matt and Pickle Friction and Andrew Park. Andrew's on watching. Oh, man, I'm almost embarrassed. He's such a talented guy. You got to check his not his podcast, but his blogs and his game reviews out. He's really, really good. Look him up online, and everybody else that's watching. So thank you guys so much. Have a great night. And
bye-bye. Yeah.
We'll have to have Archon on next. Take it easy, guys. Bye.
See ya.